So what makes a city? We decided to have this as a topic for today because we wanted to learn more about the different stakeholders that are involved in really building our city. Of course, there's architecture, but we also have different people who really play a big role in building our city. And so we're gonna have a pretty interesting mix of panelists for the next segment, which is Shelter Dialogues. Okay, so we
Hey
see
Paulo, hey Julia,
everybody logging in
Buds.
right now. And
Hey Kathy.
hi, allow me to introduce everybody. So first we have Paulo Alcazaren. Paulo Alcazaren is an architect, landscape architect, and urban designer of PA and urban designer. He is also a writer and journalist with over a dozen books and publications on architecture, design, and urban history. His advocacies are in heritage conservation, along with public parks and open space. Paulo Alcazaren is a member of International Council of Monuments and Sites in Manila, the Philippine Geographical Society, and was a founding member of the Heritage Conservation Society. He sits on the board of Escuela Taller de Filipinas Foundation and is the current chairman of the board of landscape architects at the PRC of the Philippines. Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi, Paulo.
Hi everyone.
Our returning
Nice to
guest.
see everyone.
Nice to see you. Next, we have Julia Nebrija of Agile City Partners. Julia has worked as an urban specialist with the World Bank before assuming executive positions, serving as the Assistant General Manager of Operations for the MMDA. Also, a program manager in the Office of the Secretary for the Philippines Department of Budget and Management, and most recently as Chief Operating Officer of the Philippine-Japan Initiative for Clark. She specializes in conceptualizing transformative initiatives through participatory methods and executing with results by building public-private partnerships. She is a co-founder of Agile City Partners, which is a company geared towards helping cities strategize, ideate, design, convene, facilitate, implement, and manage events and programs that help cities pivot to sustainability and agility. Welcome, Julia.
Welcome.
Hi, Julia.
Next, we have Buds Wenceslao. He is the CEO of DM Wenceslao and the Managing Director of Asiana City. He aims to build the next generation city with a master plan that takes into consideration the various characteristics and lifestyles of its citizens. With that, he also aims to support the creation of local communities by building infrastructure, utilities, and public spaces. Welcome, Buds.
Welcome back. Hi.
Hey guys. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Next, we have Rhea Matute, who is the Executive Director of the Design Center of the Philippines. Design Center's efforts go beyond promoting the value of good design and onto inspiring creative industries to create human-centered products, services, and spaces that make an impact in the Philippines and in the world. From enhancing human experiences to enabling inclusive and sustainable economic growth, Design Center of the Philippines ensure that design plays its role as a creative, strategic, and innovative tool for positive development. Welcome, Rhea.
Hi, Rhea.
Hi, Rhea. Welcome.
So, we're waiting right now for Eric Jaffe, who is the editorial director of Sidewalks Lab, as well as Vince Dison of BC. Okay, so Vince Dison is here. So, Vince Dison is the current president and CEO of BCDA. He is also serving as the President Rodrigo Duterte's advisor on flagship programs and projects, and as a deputy chief implementer of the National Action Plan against COVID-19. Welcome, Vince Dison.
Hey Vince.
Hi, Vince.
He's just trying to figure out his Zoom connection. But
Yes.
so
We also have, again, Kathy Saldana here as our blind reactor, as well as Clifford Pearson of Architectural Record.
Nice to have you
Welcome.
again, Kathy.
Hey, Cliff.
Hi,
Okay.
Cliff. Hi, Kathy.
And Cliff is also here as a blind reactor. And Cliff is, sorry.
Cliff.
Hey,
here's
Cliff.
the
Morning.
So, Cliff,
Coffee with
Good, how you
progress.
doing?
Morning, Cliff. I know it's
Hi.
early there. Thanks for joining
Yeah,
us.
thank you for
4:30.
joining us.
So,
I just didn't
Cliff.
go to bed.
Oh.
Good morning. I know it's like 4:30 a.m. there.
Yeah.
No,
So-
but it makes me feel like the old days of picking up early, getting on a plane. That's something I haven't experienced in over a year now. So it's fun.
Let me just introduce you to our viewers. Cliff is a contributing editor, is the co-author with A. Eugene Kohn of The World by Design, and writes about architecture and urbanism. Okay.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So,
So
how's
William,
Oh.
what's the dog's name?
This dog's name is Theophanis. He's Greek,
Okay.
actually.
He looks pretty comfortable there.
Yeah. Enjoying himself. Arky dog.
So,
So we have one more participant who will be here soon. I think he'll be connecting in a bit. But his name is Eric Jaffe. He is with Google Sidewalk Labs. So
how's
It's probably
everyone?
3:30
while
in the
waiting for
morning
him,
where
maybe
he is.
yeah. He's also from New York, so
How's everyone?
maybe we can begin. Okay. Okay, let's begin.
Let's actually start with our first question in the Shelter Dialogues.
Yes.
So, for you, what makes a city?
We can start with
Paulo?
yes.
Oh,
What to you
me?
makes a city? Yes.
Isn't it ladies first?
Oh, okay.
I think, Kathy, as a blind reactor, you can say your general insight about what makes a city.
Okay, well, thank you for the ladies first, Paulo, in International Women's Month. And
Yes.
hello and good morning there, Cliff. Hi, Rhea. Nice to see you again, Rhea. So, in essence, what makes a city? Is it infrastructure? Is it the power and the energy, the character of the place? Is it the mix of both old and new, the heritage with the modern structures? At the end of the day, it's the people. It's the people who power it. It's the people who fuel it. It's the people who animate it and make decisions as well about living in it. And therefore, we welcome all of you to this exciting discussion.
Thanks for that. That's really perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Our next lady in the group,
Yes,
Julia.
Julia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you and good morning from Spain. I'm here
Hola.
in the north. Hola, I'm here from the north of Spain. And,
Wow.
you know, of course, I agree with Kathy. You know, what makes a city is the people. And I think, you know, just to kick off this discussion, I know there's lots of areas that we can talk about, but I don't think that it's very complicated at the end of the day. I think we all kind of want the same thing from our cities. We want a nice place to live, some place that we can enjoy, where we can find jobs, where we can afford to be, that we feel like enriches us, helps us to reach our potential in life, gives a great quality of life to our kids. And I have to tell you, I'm living here for the first time in a 15-minute city, and it's just easy. You know, it makes sense. You walk outside and there's a park within a 5-minute walk from your house. There's a grocery store on a corner. There's a clinic nearby. There's trees on the street. You know, there's access to public squares and to buildings and architecture, that you have a sense of place. And it doesn't feel, you know, it feels magical in a way, because I haven't really lived that on a daily basis. And I think it's something that is just quite, it's quite intuitive. And what makes a city is something that makes us feel good. It makes our day easy and comfortable and enjoyable. And so I think I think that's something that's been on my mind a lot recently as I'm having this experience.
Great. And
Rhea?
then now, should
Now,
we go back
Paulo.
to
Rhea, Miss
Oh.
Rhea
Oh, yeah,
Mendoza.
Miss Ray.
Rhea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it kind of fits in the Zoom.
Oh,
yes.
So good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
I guess it's Cliff would a very good morning. So, well, I agree with Kathy and Julia. No? I've actually been in a couple of talks this week. We were talking about hubs, our hubs project with the British Council, and I kept mentioning about the social fabric. And it's really about the city. I mean, it is the people and the infrastructure in the city is supposed to promote the creation of the social fabric. And I keep, I'm gonna date myself, but even when I was growing up, I would watch Sesame Street, and they would one of my favorite songs is "Who Are the People in Your Neighborhood?" And I think that's the ideal, I guess, the concept of a city. I mean, it is really knowing who the people are in your neighborhood, or being able to talk to your baker, being able to talk to the person who makes your coffee in the cafe beside your house, or like in your area, and just knowing who their kids are. I mean, it's creating that kind of really, like, again, I mean, it's really being able to nurture that relationship with the people in your neighborhood. Unfortunately, I guess our daily lives, I guess, here in the Philippines or in Metro Manila does not provide that kind of pocket of space to know our neighbors, on a daily basis, or even the people that support your life here in the Philippines. But I hope we can change that, and I know there are a lot of efforts being done, even with Paulo and as well as William, to be able to create those structures or to create those systems by which to develop that kind of relationships.
I totally agree. Yeah. Paulo?
Oh, well, yes. Thank you. I think yes, the ladies beat me to it, so I was going to quote Shakespeare and say what makes a city but its people, but I agree. But another thing that makes a city is freedom, or the German phrase is Stadtluft macht frei. City air makes you free, and what's good about cities is or good cities is the freedom to be able to do what you want and go where you will. But technically, this past year we have not been living in real cities because we're in prison, and that's what I miss most, is the freedom to go out and enjoy other people. And I hope that will come soon. I hope Vince Dison comes online soon, and we'll ask him about the circuit breaker supposed to be implemented today. That's it. Maybe Buds can share.
Vince is here.
welcome.
Oh, there he is.
Welcome.
Let's introduce
He
Vince.
heard you, Paulo.
Yes.
You summoned him.
So sorry, everyone. I just had as you know, we're experiencing a bit of a surge. So I'm in the middle of I was in the middle of just a very important meeting with the National Task Force. Everyone, just please keep safe. If you don't need to go out, better not to go out. Better to stay home.
We were
Thank
just
you. My
talking.
apologies to everyone. So I will try to shift my mind to building cities now. So and hi everyone, especially to Julia. We miss you. As you know, Julia was with us in DCDA and the infrastructure team for quite a while. So
nice to see you. Nice to see you healthy.
thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
So currently, the question is, what makes a city? And we're actually listening to Paulo explain his thoughts about it.
And I think he's waiting for something from you.
Yeah.
He's waiting for you to implement it.
Because I said that what makes a city is freedom to go anywhere, freedom to meet up with friends, and we were waiting for you to come online so we could ask you about this circuit breaker.
About that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that later.
Okay.
I think just to weigh in on what makes a city a city, you know, and you know when especially when Julia and I were working together in the national government in BCDA and when she was with MMDA, I think this might be an oversimplification, but we always said that cities, we always lived by the idea that bottom line cities must be built and must be maintained for people. I think that is our very basic, very simple idea that at the end of the day, when you design a city, when you try to build a new city or when you're trying to improve a current one, people must always be at the center of that idea. No, and it may sound simple to many people, but actually it's really not. As a case in point, cities in the Philippines and many countries in the developing world are not cities that are built for people. They are the opposite. No, they are built mostly for cars. They are built mostly for they are not built for public transport. They are not built for walking. They are not built for biking. They are not built to have a healthy lifestyle and a healthy sense of space. So what we tried to do, I think, in the past 5 years, with the help of people like Julia, and now with Kathy, now also with Kathy and her firm, who's going to help us design a railway in from Subic to Clark, is we try to, at the center of all our planning, of all our execution, is always people have to be first and they have to be at the center. So like if you go to Clark now, at least we've tried to build what we feel is a city that's meant for people is, you know, you will see in innovations like dedicated bike lanes, you will see a running BRT system in Clark, you will see wide pedestrian lanes, you will see urban design standards and guidelines that are really meant for people to enjoy the city. You have infrastructure such as, you know, huge places to park your cars near railway stations, near bus stations, near integrated transport terminals that will allow people to park if they're coming from outside, let's say from Metro Manila or Northern Luzon. And then once they get to Clark, they take public transport or they take a bike or they walk. You know? So I think these are the things that we tried to do. It's not going to be done when the administration ends next year, but hopefully we've started something that will continue on for years to come.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Can I make a reaction to that? I like to pick up on Vincent's point that it's simple, but it's complicated, right? I mean, it's simple at the end of the day, what we want, because we know that we want wide sidewalks. We know that we want tree-lined streets. We know that we want this kind of quality of life. And the complicated part, I think, is really getting the system around that to be able to put the policies, put the infrastructure, put the investments, make those decisions. You know, I think that's what becomes complicated about it in that way, is how to manage a city. You know, that's something that I learned very deeply in, MMDA. That's where it becomes complicated, I think. And then what's simple about it is that we know the enjoyment, we know the pleasure of being able to walk outside our house and be in a park in a matter of 5 minutes, and see the pleasure on our kids' faces when they play in a playground. I mean, that's something that everyone can understand. And so I like that he brings up that it's simple, but it's also complicated. And it's
very complicated
for what makes a city, you know.
Yeah, I mean, just to chime in, I mean, obviously people, everybody said about, how cities are built for people. That's why, it's really important to have a holistic view when you're doing it. We're actually, as the only, I think, private developer here who's doing a citywide development. I mean, when we're planning something, we're also looking at how it's going to be maintained, what the longevity is of the infrastructure, from landscaping, even to the buildings themselves, even to the sidewalks. So we always want to be sure that it's something that can be sustained and can be maintained for a long term. Yeah.
I think the simple thing about New Clark City, or the simpler thing about New Clark City, is unlike Metro Manila, you don't have to deal with 16 cities in one town or 17 mayors. You're just dealing with New Clark City and BCDA, right? So it's in essence the problem of managing and building cities in the Philippines is the overlapping jurisdictions of LGUs
That's
and
right.
national line agencies, which complicates a lot of things at the
That's
ground.
right. And also, no, just to add to Julia and Bud's point, no, the complication really is the classic. The devil is really in the details. No, you've got to have every single minutest detail right for it to work. Now, for example, no, here there's so much open space here in Clark, no, but you need to activate those spaces. No, you need to activate those spaces. You need to put the infrastructure that will allow people access, that will allow them to park, that will allow them to. You need to put the restrooms, the pathways, etc. And that really the planning, and I really admire DM Wenceslao, no, because the planning in that is really complicated. It's complicated and it's very, very detailed. You know, Julia and I. We work with the best planners in the world, like Surbana Jurong of Singapore. No? And you cannot imagine, even with the Singaporean planners, the kind of back and forth that we have to go through between them and our Japanese partners, just to make sure that the urban design standards and guidelines are really, cover basically everything. No? And Julia was the CEO of our joint venture with our Japanese partners for, I think, 2 years, no, and she can tell you about the complexity of doing like that, and that's practically a small brownfield and greenfield city. I mean, to do that in a place like Metro Manila, and Julia's obviously experience there with MMDA. I mean, it's a huge challenge. No? It's a huge challenge to do it. So our philosophy is, we try to show proof of concept. We try to show as best as we can that it can be done, and hopefully things get replicated slowly but surely.
I think it can be done. It's just that we forget our history and we've forgotten how to build cities correctly. If you look at the history of town and city building in the Philippines past the 1950s, we've forgotten how to build at that level of detail. And so it's something that we have to rediscover, and it's an urbanism and an approach to urbanism that we have to rekindle, and specifically something that's pertinent to Filipino culture. So we need that base to be able to carry it forward. I mean, I respect our Singaporean and Japanese partners in all of this, and maybe Vince, you forget I'm in your project team for the New Clark City Central Park. We need to approach the design of cities from that human perspective. But very, very important is the Filipino culture and the use of space.
Yeah, and Paulo,
absolutely, sir, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. And, talking about detail, being very detail oriented, like what Vince was saying, when we were doing the Green project with DBM, and we were working with 145 cities across the Philippines on public open space development. And one of the things that we did was actually invite them to come to Metro Manila and tour some of the places that Paulo has designed, and literally walk them through inch by inch. This is how this is the kind of drainage that you need. These are the types of trees that you should be planting. This is what a bench looks like that, is easy to maintain. This is the type of lighting that you put at the right height so that it's actually becomes illumination that's safe makes people feel safe in this space. I mean, we went through all those details in the spaces that you designed, Paulo, because of course, landscape architecture is its own field because of this.
Well, it's not just me; it's a whole bunch of us in the Association of Landscape Architects, and a lot of others in overlapping fields like architecture and urban design. But there are not that many of us, and much less with enough experience to be able to show people how it's done. But we're gaining ground, and that's shown by the number of people who've taken advantage of the green opportunity. And so we find a lot of those cities are now learning how to build spaces for people when previously all they did was design roads and bridges.
which is a great also to touch on that, putting something on the ground and letting it be an example, leading by example. Now we have parks and different types of waterfronts in 145 cities across the Philippines. And that's now a huge learning curve that has been crossed for a lot of our officials, a lot of our cities. And now the future generations will see this as an important part of what a city should be.
And once you plant that seed, like in Iloilo, when we designed the Esplanade 7 years ago, we had to hold workshops with the Public Works Department and the city planning and architecture offices to show them what's the difference between urban design or design for cars and design for people. And we had these workshops. We had to show them images. We had to explain to them the detailing involved. But that was a learning curve. You're right, Julia. And in fact, in the first phase of the Esplanade, the contractor interpreted our walkways for people as roads for cars, and they put curbs where there was not supposed to be curbs. But it was a learning process. After the third phase, they sort of got it, and they're now in phase 9, and most of the additional phases are being run by the local engineers and architects there with very minimal oversight from us.
I think one of the, I guess what needs to also get emphasized is, aside from building the hard infrastructure, I think the LGUs or even like the community has to also put in the soft infrastructure in it, activating these spaces. So then they just don't become, as built, but no one uses it. So like either community groups or even the local government can provide incentives to put events, activities, again, so that people come together and they actually use the spaces. So and that again goes back to creating that social fabric within the city that would make the city even more vibrant. Talking about car, I was part of the early group that went into Subic Bay back in the 90s. Converting the first group that converted really Subic Bay into private use. Coming from Manila, I thought I can go to Subic, just for the day and then go back in the evening to sleep in Manila. But then after a month of being in Subic Bay, just the quality of life that I had in living in Subic, and I was at work in 5 minutes. I didn't even have to take my car to go to work. And then I saw the bay in front of me every day. So even if it was so stressful, I have the beauty of Subic Bay in front of me. And whenever I got so stressed, I would just walk out, breathe in the sea air, and I was okay. And that was like so idyllic for me. Even at the mornings when we wake up, there's an eagle outside our window. So it was just, for me, it was an idyllic time. And it also taught me about, just having this space and having this sense of city, while it may not be, it may not have the latest cinemas, it may not have the latest shopping malls, but it created a community amongst us that were working there. And as well as it connected us even to discover the Olongapo, the city of Olongapo. So which was, for me, it was really just an eye-opener.
Well, you'll be glad to know, Rhea, that in New Clark City, Vince here is overseeing the creation of a 20-meter lake, which is the centerpiece of the Central Park, right, Vince? And so you will not miss the water if you lived in New Clark City. Once you look out from the residential districts, that will be the centerpiece. And it's also flood detention instrument. So.
Yeah, and also it's also, thank you, Paul, and it's also a water supply system.
Yes.
Well, Buds here is by the water, Buds. So it's something that you also enjoy, the bay.
Yes, so we're, at least for us now, we're connected with 4 other major developments. So obviously on our side, we're focusing on our own Esplanade development. Actually, Paulo was one of our early consultants to design most of our landscaping inside Asiana. And we're still keeping true to that. Right now, we're actually building the first segment of our linear park to connect to Manila Bay. Yeah.
Yes, I remember, Buds, that at the end of that walkway was the site of the historic Battle of Manila Bay between the
Yes, yes.
Americans and the Spanish, and we had recommended that the National Historical NHCP put a marker, and maybe we could recreate that battle every year. But instead of the Spanish and the Americans, we can have the Americans and the Chinese. Oops, sorry, I didn't.
Cliff, your thoughts?
Thoughts?
Going back to Ria's point on activating space, and also Vince, activating the space, making it exciting, giving it life, not just building the place. I think that's something that we have a very big advantage for in the Philippines, because we have a lot of people. People love to be outside. People love to, be around and making chismes and stuff like that. Want to be seen. That's a very natural thing about being out and about. And, some countries are really, now not so much in the pandemic because everyone was kind of looking to be outside, but some countries are really struggling to find ways to get people to use these public spaces and have active, vibrant streets. I mean, that's a whole area of urban design in and of itself, especially for most small European cities. And I think that's something that we are very fortunate for in the Philippines, that people like to be outside, exercise, be with family, very social. And you just need to create the spaces to do that in a way that allows them to be able to participate, and just allowing them to participate will make a very vibrant city. And, some places have that regulated down to the, very minute details. I'm just thinking, Ria, about you the other day, because New York City just came out with an open culture permit. So you can actually apply to be outside, have performances, do whatever you want to do in certain places. Of course, you have to apply to be there, but that's a kind of a nice way, to not only build the place, but and have a regulation and allow people to participate in a space in a way that's productive and allowed. I think that's kind of a nice middle ground that I was excited to see being adopted from the pandemic.
Or like what we used to do, Julia. Remember when we were doing our Intramuros project? Like opening up the Intramuros so that people don't look at it just as the walled city, but creating that new culture, the young culture, bringing in Sunday markets, bringing in performances, and it's open to everyone. I mean, I guess that's also made it democratizing the events, also kind of created that a whole different kind of interaction.
And there's something like Intramuros too, where people don't go to on a daily basis. That was so important to create a relationship between people and a place. So that they have a reason to reconnect and form a relationship with this area, and then it becomes part of you. The city becomes part of us in that way. And I think, one step further from that would be, instead of having a group have to organize it every time, maybe opening it up to mini groups to be able to organize, like, okay, you can close the street. What would you do with it? And that's something that I think the pandemic has shown very strongly. I mean, in Rockwell, I don't know how many times I went to the estate management office and said, can't we close the street? The one where all of the restaurants come outside. So like the tables are all outside the restaurants, which is great. Yes. But then the pathway becomes very narrow for people to walk by. And as a new mom with a stroller, I'm just like pushing everyone's seats around. So like, why don't we just close that street, expand the space, let people do it? No. Everyone wants to be dropped off at the front of the mall. We can't. There'll be traffic. There'll be this, there'll be that. The world will end. Yeah. And what happened during the pandemic? They closed it. Yes. And everyone loves it. And I can see now, and you're seeing it in Legazpi Village, in Salcedo Village, seeing it all across these places where we never imagined that you would be able to close the street and put picnic tables and umbrellas, and people would be outside. They said that before. Filipinos don't want to sit on the street and eat. We disproved that over and over again in Poblacion and all these new commercial concepts. So it's just a matter of like opening that door and showing what's possible and showing that it works. And not only is the world not going to end, but everyone's going to love you that much more for it. And I think that's something that the pandemic has really just kind of fast tracked altogether.
Yeah. The pandemic is our version of Sadiq Khan was to New York. Is to convince people that it could be done. So now it's
interesting. COVID,
Go
in
ahead.
some ways, is an X-ray that reveals a lot of the underlying structures in a place, in a city. So, it's been almost exactly a year since I was last in Manila. And I'm just wondering what the panelists, what other lessons have we learned from COVID? And what are some of the opportunities that the pandemic has created? There's a great phrase of, never let a crisis go unused. So, I mean, are there other initiatives in Manila to sort of use the pandemic as leverage to create a better city?
I think it's interesting you said that, if you're looking at the highly dense areas in Manila, obviously Makati, Fort, these areas, one thing, these cities have high-rise developments, but what you'll find is even though that there are parks, that are planned within these developments, you see that it's still lacking. And when you're trapped in a condominium for a couple of months, you're severely looking for that open space. That's why in Legazpi Village, where I used to live, they suddenly closed down streets just because people were looking for basically open space. It's the swimming pool and the gym and the clubhouse inside the condo is not enough. People wanted to go out to at least be exposed to open air. And we're even for us, like we're building our own developments, our own little city, and we're now computing just how much, when it's fully built out, how much open space is available per person. And we're trying to see what this ratio is for other world-class developments, see how it stacks up. And right now we're seeing that it's still lacking. So we're trying to find ways of, okay, if this happens and we're fully built out, maybe we can close these areas, these streets, which are actually too wide, but it's already, these are government, but these are already in the plan. So maybe in some way in the future, we'll be able to close these streets out.
Yes, but one study shows that, well, of course, Singapore has 320 public parks servicing only 5 or 6 million people, while Manila has only about 200 hectares of parks and open space. So the ratio of open space to population in Metro Manila is, I believe, just 0.2 meters of public parks and open space per person compared to the 6 square meters in Singapore, and Cebu has about 0.1 square meter open space. But aside from the size of the proportion, is the access, as Julie was saying, everything has to be reached in 15 minutes, and that is the metric that Singapore and New York has reached, which you can reach a public open space, a plaza or park, within 15 to 20 minutes of walking.
I think one of the things that really got also fast-tracked in the pandemic was around the transportation systems. Using that as an opportunity to really, the bus rationalization happened finally in Metro Manila in the wake of this. A new EDSA carousel was put in place on EDSA of all places, the most difficult place to do anything, to come up with, a BRT light system. Cities are taking the opportunity to put in bike infrastructure that they've been sitting on maybe these plans for a while, and this really gave them the chance to really give the green light and do it. So I think on transportation, we were severely undersupplied in public transportation before the pandemic. That was really challenged as you saw limited supply again during the pandemic because of spacing, queuing, and these kinds of issues to contain the spread. And so I think around transportation, we're going to see a turning point. This will be a turning point, I think, in the transportation history also for the Philippines.
I agree, Julie. And the other elephant in the room that's come out because of the pandemic is housing. And the fact that people had to commute before pandemic 2-3 hours from peri-urban areas because that's where they could afford to live has shown a light on inequitable distribution of and provision of housing or social housing within the metro. And people haven't yet started to look at that really seriously because they're looking at transport first. But that's the other thing with all of the government assets within Metro Manila. You can provide social housing and housing for everyone within city limits, so the commute times get cut down to half an hour, and the distance from where you live to where you work gets cut down from 60 kilometers to just 10 or 15. housing. We need housing. That's the bottom line.
What happened to the
Go ahead.
plans to bring the government offices to Clark? I know that, I mean, that could be a way to decongest the city as well. No?
Yeah, thanks, Rhea. Yeah, so the president signed an executive order 119, and that is underway actually. No, starting with satellite offices, because you have to understand, no, it's quite difficult to just do that in one go. You know, it's a lot of change management needs to be done in order to, you know, to correctly achieve that goal. You know? But the good thing is it's been done. No, the executive order has been signed, and slowly but surely, this will happen, beginning with satellite offices initially, and then later on, key government offices who do not need to be in Manila will move to New Clark City. Just to give you examples, no, the biggest agency that has already signed, no, and will already start building, I think as early as this year, is the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, which will move its entire currency and currency production and minting facility currently in East Avenue to New Clark City, no, in a 30-hectare property. No? So that's huge. No? Others, such as the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Science and Technology, all of these agencies have already signified, and we already signed with the DA to move some of its major offices to New Clark City. So it's going to happen. It's not going to be like, you know, what Prime Minister Mahathir did in Putrajaya, that only took, what, less than 10 years, I think, for the entire government to move to Putrajaya. But we'll get there eventually. You know? So it's critical that this policy continues into the succeeding administrations after this one.
So we actually have a question from our audience. He says, many cities that were built from scratch have proven to be failures. Places like Songdo, Masdar, Cyberjaya or Cyberhaya have not become the world-class cities that was promised. How can we ensure that Clark will not be any different from these failed cities? Anonymous attendee.
No, that to the anonymous attendee, that's a great question. No, and the answer to that is, well, of course, there is no certainty. No, but the best way to plan a greenfield city is to ensure that the infrastructure surrounding it, no, is in place so that people can actually get there. No, that is the most important ingredient. No, and the key in Clark is, I think, number one, the infrastructure is there, and we're even building more. No, for example, the airport is there, we're expanding it. The highways are there with NLEX and SETEX. We're expanding those as well, especially with the roads that are being built now. The railway system being built by Japan and ADB will soon be there in maybe five years, all the way up to New Clark City. So the infrastructure is a key ingredient to that, no? Where people can connect, no? Can connect initially from populated areas such as Metro Manila and parts of Central and Northern Luzon. But more importantly, to start building that critical mass of people within an area. And the good thing about Clark and what goes for it, apart from the infrastructure, is that Clark sits right smack in the middle of one of the most populous areas outside of Metro Manila in Luzon, and the areas that has one of the highest purchasing power in the island of Luzon and in the entire country, mainly due to the high number of OFW families living in the central Luzon area surrounding Clark, in Tarlac, in Pampanga, in Zambales, in Bataan, all the way down to Bulacan, and all the way going up to Pangasinan and La Union. So those are critical ingredients, that will hopefully ensure that we don't end up like the likes of Brasilia, the likes of, like you said, Songdo and the other, and then to some extent even Putrajaya, because people really don't live there, and people still commute all the way from Kuala Lumpur going there. So those are two critical ingredients. But the third one is, I think, to me, is equally important. And this is building a sense of community in the area. That's why Julia and I, when Julia's still with us, we really painstakingly were very involved in the soft infrastructure, not just the roads, the trains, the BRTs, et cetera, but also the soft infrastructure, the parks, the people-centered infrastructure like bike lanes and pedestrian lanes. These are not as big in scale as an airport or a railway system or a BRT system, but for everyday people to actually live there, they are critical. Especially in a country, as Paulo said earlier, where there is a dearth in these types of open spaces and infrastructure for people. So this is very important, and hopefully, once Clark and New Clark City develops into this, then you will ensure that those things, those cities you mentioned, will not have the same experience. New Clark will not have the same experience as those cities you mentioned. By the way, just to last point na lang, especially during the pandemic, we have noticed a tremendous increase of volume of foot traffic and people traffic in Clark. All the way from Metro Manila, all the way from Pangasinan, and everywhere throughout central northern Luzon, and all the way from Metro Manila. And you know what they do in Clark? They bike, they stay in the parks. Julia, I don't know if you know this, but we have a big central park in Clark. It's probably about 20 hectares. And during the pandemic, every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that park is completely packed with people. Ordinary families bringing their tents, bringing their, they bring these portable grills that they put there. Nag-iiyaw sila doon. And it's just really, it's just so heartwarming to watch. But it just shows how desperate our people are for, for things that, we've taken for granted for such a long time.
And
so that's
Vince, one thing that also people have to be able to work, have jobs. And one of the things that, of course, before we're interested in attracting companies to locate there, looking at the regional economic development opportunities. Clark sits in the agricultural belt of the Philippines. There's a lot of distribution chain. There's a lot of, there's a lot of importance in terms of Clark being a regional hub as well of an economic center. But now that you can work remotely as well, this is something that might open up new opportunities for economic opportunities in new cities that you can live in anywhere in the world. I mean, most of the companies that I'm reading about now will allow this. If you went home to Ohio during the crisis, you don't have to return to San Francisco to work at a big company in Silicon Valley. So you can be working remotely in the place that has a good quality of life for you, in a place that you want to live and have a connection to, and still have economic opportunities. That's going to be huge for cities moving forward.
Maybe
sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead, Paulo.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. After you.
No, just to what Julia said about the new kind of work. I know there have been some discussions also with BCBA on transforming Clark also as a creative city. And I remember in Richard Florida's book on the rise of the creative class, as well as the creative city, there are 3 requirements. It's like talent, which, Filipinos are creative talents, we do definitely have. Tolerance within the city, as well as technology. So again, given this remote work, I mean, it's about putting in also the infrastructure to be able to do teleworking, right? Or like working from home or working, like online. So I think that's definitely a great opportunity for Clark to position itself. And I know there's a lot of creatives also around Clark, or even like creative process outsourcing. To and to have Clark be the center of that kind of a push towards a creative city, and having a focal point for the creative class of the Philippines. Because even like leisure, I mean, like again, this is very important for the creative class. Is there access to leisure opportunities, leisure activities that can be integrated into their work life? So it's not about just having it on weekends, but even like before you go to work or before you start work, and then after work, you have access to these facilities. And Clark definitely has that in like within its area.
And even also with what Buds is doing in near Manila Bay, I think it's you have an opportunity to master plan a really large area that we don't get that chance to do anymore in a lot of Philippine cities. And being able to concentrate on that kind of daily journey, like what you're saying, Ria, having things integrated into your daily life, not having to make separate appointments and separate, like carving out time, have leisure, to have recreation, to be social. That's something that I've just been learning. Not that I'm so social, right? Because I'm new in a new city, and during a pandemic, it's not that easy, especially with my Spanish with a mask on, trying to like make friends awkwardly at the park. But like, I think that's something I've learned, is that, even just a simple act of going to the grocery store for me can be such an enjoyable part of my day. I walk through a plaza, I see something beautiful, I'm comfortable, things are safe. I'm not thinking about how much space I have around me, because it's just automatically there, because it's designed for people. And I think having that integrated into your daily life, where it's not such a, okay, let's pack up the car and take the kids somewhere that they can enjoy, but oh, we have to go meet your mom anyway, so why don't we take this pathway so we can pass by that park, so Bella can play there for a little while we go on and do the next thing. It doesn't have to, it's something that, like, having that just woven through the daily experience is such an interesting, it's such a great, even when I lived in New York, things were quite segregated. I lived in Harlem, and kind of in a food desert, and I had to walk very, very long distances to even reach a grocery store. And my journey there wasn't necessarily going to be totally pleasant. So I think I really like that point, and that's something that I'm learning very deeply now also, that following the basics of urban design, having mixed use, active ground floor, short blocks, open spaces designed throughout, it really does. It's not rocket science.
Guys, we have a question here from Rebecca Plaza. We were talking about like the initiatives for open space for areas like Rockwell, High Street, and Salcedo. But how does this translate for open livable spaces for the more informal sectors of our city, especially now that we're seeing a lot of spike in areas like Tondo, and places like that. And I also, you can like kind of like extend this to, we've been talking about managed communities, like Asiana, like BCDA, Clark in particular. But how do we translate lessons from these communities, these managed communities like Makati also, to the greater city in general, in terms of like Metro Manila and the wider areas out there?
Well, the open spaces can be carved out in a lot of these other areas in the informal settlements, aside from older sections of the city like Poblacion, from the streets themselves. And so if you get people to share the streets and make them more usable by people and pedestrians, then you can yield a lot of open space. In Poblacion, we were doing studies for a private developer and partly for Makati. And there are areas there that have lost usability because of lack of connectivity, like the Plaza Cristo del Rey in front of the Peter and Paul Church have been closed up because they built a police station. But if you opened it up, it could serve as a fairly large open area. And the streets themselves, once you get the participation of the residents to share streets with for their cars and for pedestrian traffic through all of the district from top to bottom, then you can get more space. Informal settlements are of course are not the ideal settings for living in cities, and they are a reflection of a need for housing where there's no housing provided. But you have to remember that most of our informal settlers have an FAR of less than or one or less than 1.5. And if you provided them with social housing in medium rise buildings where the FRRs are three to four, uh, uh, like um, like Singapore, or 5 to 10 like Hong Kong, you will be able to generate open spaces at the ground level. And Singapore has done that by putting their housing on pilotis, and so you have a lot of open space available and within reach for all of these housing estates. It really has to go back to uh, a proper way of building cities and proper way of providing social housing for everyone.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I think, because some places are already highly built up, it'll be about repurposing underutilized space. When we were working on the Green program, we saw so many innovations, like, I wouldn't necessarily innovations, but creative thinking, like, okay, we have this stadium that's only used a couple times a week, if ever. Let's redesign, let's re-landscape and let people come in and use the green in the center of the oval as a park, and let's put pocket parks around. Let's use that space under a bridge that's kind of just a dead zone, and let's activate that. It's on the waterfront. Let's make that into a place that people can use. So I think repurposing underutilized spaces will be key for a lot of our cities. Also, we need to really focus strongly on good land use planning, making sure that you don't just portion off every bit of land without some kind of plan. That's something that has also been, if you look across Metro Manila, it's actually a very low city. Most of what Paulo was saying, you see one story, 2 stories across streets and streets and streets, and a lot of cities have sold off all of their lands. They're privatizing a lot of these areas. And I think, basic land use planning to go back and say, we need this amount of open space. We need to make sure that people have access to this for those cities that still can do that. And a lot of the cities in the Philippines can.
I'm just wondering, is Manila doing planning for anticipating autonomous vehicles and how that might actually change the relationship between pedestrians and cars, the street and the sidewalk? Is that something that's being explored?
We're still planning for pedestrians before we plan for autonomous vehicles.
Yes, all the driving in Manila.
Autonomous vehicles, because the idea is that there'll be many fewer crashes between people and cars, that actually the separation between sidewalks and street, the whole relationship will change, and that it'll open up more space on the streets for pedestrians. And in some ways go back to the way cities were about 100 years ago, when people walked in the streets because the vehicles were horse-drawn, and if you got hit by one, they were only going a few miles an hour. Anyway, from what I've been reading, the whole relationship between people and cars and streets and sidewalks, potentially could change radically, opening up a lot more open space for human beings.
Opportunity to leapfrog the whole traffic problem. And I was wondering how Asiana and Clark would be dealing with smart cities and things like that, actually.
So, just going back, like for us, we've invested in more or less our smart infrastructure by just laying down fiber optic cables in the whole of Asiana. There's just so many new things coming out. To be quite honest, we don't know what smart city initiatives right now will do the test of time. But just going back, at least for us, we try to make public space. We're investing in the public realm just to be sure it's accessible for for everyone, everybody in the city, from the workers to the obviously the condo owners. But one thing we're seeing is that I think going back to Rika's question, even if we do build this, you know, it's still a far distance from, let's say, informal sectors. So that's why I think housing affordability is a big issue that should be tackled by cities, because right now, like for us, we see all of the workers, let's say, there's so many hotels and there's so many offices inside our developments. Like we don't think they can afford like the condos that are being built or being rented out in the area. So we're seeing like even for our own employees, like they're going home to Cavite and Laguna and places that are 1 to 2 hours away. So even right now, we're already exploring like interim housing, container housing, prefab housing, just good for 10 to 20 years. And we're not even thinking about it in terms of, reaching 10 to 20% IRR. We're just thinking about it as an amenity to the people putting up offices, putting up business. And in the age of this pandemic, where they want their employees to be near their offices, to be able to walk and bike to to work, it's something that we're giving as an amenity to the locators inside our own developments.
Well, it all points to the fact that the government has abandoned their responsibility to provide shelter for everyone, and allowing, I'm sorry, Buds, but not you, but some real estate developers to circumvent the original law that required socialized housing. And so a loophole was put in that if you had a housing development, you need to put the 20% of housing originally within the same site, but they introduced a loophole that allowed you to provide that housing as far as 10, 15, 20 kilometers away. So you have to bring that back. And the other problem is that in the city, in the metro, even close to your claimed area, there's lots of government land, except that the default for government agencies is to sell it to the highest bidder. So then you don't have the opportunity to provide socialized housing. But if you look at it in the backlog of the 3 or 4 million housing units in Metro Manila alone, there is money to be made in the provision of this housing, because the informal settlers actually pay a huge part of their income to the informal powers that be that allow them to squat in those lands. So it doesn't make any sense that government does not fulfill its job of providing housing, because the 3 or 4 million backlog in Metro Manila alone, if you apply the model of Hong Kong and Singapore in the provision of socialized housing, it can be done, and it can be done within 5 to 10 years, as had been shown in those 2 examples. It's just that we don't want to do it, or at least government. I'm sorry, is Vince still around?
I'm sure Vince is there. It's already 5:34, and it's kind of about time.
No, but Clark Green City, New Clark City is providing housing, socialized housing.
I think that's the point.
Paul, no, that is one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's one issue that we have in Clark, no, and this I think needs to be addressed, if not now, maybe in the next government and the next Congress, is because the limitation of Clark and Subic, as Rhea would know, she stayed there, no, and she lived there, is all the land there is only for leasehold, even for Filipinos, no, and that is a big challenge in the Filipino culture and in the Filipino market, that you cannot own the land, and you cannot. Since you cannot own it, you cannot you cannot give it to your kids and your grandkids. Hindi mo pwedeng ipamana. And that is a major constraint. So what we are proposing, and we have a pending bill in Congress, is to allow for the sale of land for residential only, and limited to roughly about 5% of total land holdings, based on the master plan of Subic, Clark, etc., etc. So that is our proposal. So, but this will require congressional action, because right now in the law, all former U.S. bases are only for lease, and not for sale.
But
So
the loophole
we
there
need
could,
to
yes.
we need to push that. Of course, there's residential here. No, I live here, but I lease. No, a lot of people live here, but they lease. No? But if if sale is allowed, then you would see a greater demand for land for residential here in these zones.
Vince,
A
does
compromise could be had by something more creative. You have leasehold and you have freehold, and it's just the amount of lease, the tenure that can make a difference between owners. The problem with property in the Philippines is that you've been sold on this idea that you have to own the land on which your house sits, while in other countries, property is different from house and lot. The house and lot paradigm has been so inculcated in us that nobody wants anything except house and lot.
Yeah.
But leasehold properties have value, and it's just a matter of creative thinking in provision of this type of housing. And housing for people working in the city need not be things that you buy. Rental housing is a good solution to a lot of the problems of shelter in cities. And I believe that some cities are looking at that already, and that's something. So we have not really, and the Department of Urban Development and Housing has to look at all of these other creative uh,
Yeah.
opportunity to address housing.
Yeah, Paulo, yeah, I agree with you. No? The market, our market is still not as mature as other markets, you know. However, there are legal impediments to what you're saying because right now under the Public Lease Act, you can only lease 50 plus 25, maximum 75. And if you talk to, you know, the likes of Collier's, David Lee Chu, for your ideas to work, you've got to be talking about leasehold rights allowable 99 years above, no?
Yes.
And that will require legislative action. No? So we've got to, I mean, your ideas are great. We've just got to find a way to fix our regulatory framework, to modernize our regulatory framework to accommodate those ideas.
Well, Vince, that's the reason I'm running for Congress next election.
Good luck, sir. We'll support you.
Is
Are
that
you serious?
No, no, it's called
No, that's not.
Madafaka
can
or
you make
something.
that serious?
No.
Yeah.
The only way to change is to legislate, and our legislators are not doing their job if they're not listening to what we actually need and providing for that. So I'm as frustrated as everybody else.
But I would add, Paulo, you know, something that we have worked on before is encouraging everyone to get involved in their cities and taking higher level of participation. I know this is one of the questions also for this session is, you know, everyone has the right to talk to their barangay, to work in their cities, to demand change, to work on legislation, to be part of giving feedback on ordinances, to request for transparency, especially on budgeting at the local level, at your city level. You know, these are things that I think need to also be strengthened. Everyone has a role to play. Everyone has the right to play that role in shaping their city. And I think that's something that also needs to, a dialogue that needs to be furthered to help make sure that we have equitable cities and make sure that we have cities that reflect what people really want, what they need, and are able to respond to real-time challenges.
So before we turn this over to Kathy and Cliff for their questions and reactions, we just want to ask Vince, you know, the kind of like the elephant in the room, and ask him like, what are, you know, how are we doing as a city right now, and how are we gonna get out of this situation as a city, and maybe share with us the plans and, you know, the next steps that we're looking at.
You're talking about the COVID response?
Yeah.
Well, you know, the spikes, the surges are worldwide, no, practically, no? Everywhere surging, and we just have to deal with it. It's primarily being caused by the entry of these new variants that are more infectious, but it's also being caused as well by, you know, bottom line, it's fatigue. It's fatigue. It's people just, you know, everybody's just so tired, and when you get tired, you tend to be more lax. So we've got to really find a way to become as vigilant as we were when we were able to control this in the middle of last year. No, Europe is surging. I'm sure Julia knows that well. No? In Spain, I think they're hitting like 20,000 cases in one day now. So we've just got to really hold on until, you know, we get a significant chunk of our population vaccinated. That's what we've got to do. And for the coming days, we'll see. We'll in all likelihood some restrictions will be imposed, but I don't think we're going to go into lockdown. I'm sure that's the question you all want to ask me, right? Are we going to lockdown? So my answer to that is most likely no.
Okay,
But
so
there will be additional restrictions. So
Maybe a granular lockdown.
no, we're already doing that. But we'll be imposing some additional restrictions, and especially especially in the homes and in the workplaces wherein a lot of the new transmissions are coming from.
Yes.
If I may, the backdrop that I have is actually the work that was done by the Communication Design Association of the Philippines together with the Design Advisory Council of Design Center. And this is basically a free asset that's being given to, we're hoping to be able to share this with the local government units to, again, as a nudge to the citizenry to really just be, to observe minimum health protocols that is mandated by the local government units. Yes, the COVID fatigue is there, but definitely, I mean, we feel that also through a more human-centered creative communication on reminding people to wear their mask, to maintain social distancing, and just to look out for one another. This could be the contribution of designers in creating a communication initiative to address COVID-19. I know we're trying to work with William to hopefully discuss the concept behind Paalalabas. But it's really, again, I mean, it's a creative asset that we want to make available for everyone. This is not for profit or, it's really we're working actually with Canva to have this available to as many people as possible so that they can use this and then create signs from businesses as well as to the small sari stores as well as the local government units. To remind people, again, just to be cautious.
Okay,
Sorry,
well,
I put that in.
yes, that's fine. Well, Cliff and I would like to round up the questions as we approach an interesting last 17 minutes or so to this great panel. So, Cliff, would you like to round up some questions, and would like to hear from all of our 5 panelists?
Well, I think here in New York, what's been interesting about the pandemic is that it's revealed the connections that we all have with people that we in the past maybe took for granted. So people that we now call essential workers were mostly invisible workers a year ago. And I'm just wondering, what is the impact on, of this sort of, realization in a place like Manila, which is even more dense and, in some ways more crowded than New York City. I mean, are the connections between different types of people, different types of workers, is that creating a sense that everybody's in this together? Or is it creating a sense that each group is now fighting for its own recognition and its own, sets of needs? Is this something that can be taken advantage of, or is this something that's going to tear us apart?
If I may
Sort
start,
of a big question, maybe too big
no,
for
I think
this hour.
in Filipino society, I think there's a lot of compassion only because we live in multi-generational households, as well as we have people outside of our immediate family who are part of our family. I think, there is that we call it. I mean, we call it malasakit or compassion. So I think, at least personally, from my interaction as well as my circle, there is definitely an appreciation of the invisibles in society. I think again it has to be a bigger conversation. I know in Europe there is this talk about living wage. In Europe, in the US, there is this talk about a living wage, and a lot of the invisibles have been, they have a lot to benefit if we really take this conversation seriously. And that's the way I think there is an awakening. I'm just hoping that this awakening is not a temporary awakening, but it's something that that would the momentum would increase and taken seriously.
It's a really loaded question, Cliff. And I think
It's a pretty big question. Sorry.
well, but I no, but also in a place like the Philippines, and I think COVID was a really big equalizer in a way, right? Because it could have reached everyone. I mean, we're having questions here about like, we're talking about privileged places like Rockwell and things like that. I mean, Rockwell was one of the first places that was hit. We had some of the first cases were in Rockwell, and I think it was very equalizing that this could happen to anyone, and also everyone is interdependent. And that was something that I think a lot of people took for granted, like what you're saying. And I think what I hope has been realized from this is that, we can't, marginalizing people doesn't serve anyone well, and I think a lot of people felt that who are in a privileged place for many years, felt that very strongly during the pandemic. If your helpers can't get to your house, if your trash collectors can't come, collect trash, if people can't go to the grocery store to work the cash machines, all of this, everyone felt now what it means if we don't do good urban planning. It wasn't anymore, you couldn't survive just on your, I mean, in some cases you can, I guess, but privilege was kind of cut out of it in a lot of aspects of life. And I hope that will be an eye-opener for people in positions of privilege to take a different approach and have been maybe humbled and creating much more empathy across society. I don't know how that will translate in the long term, but I know that the opportunity has definitely been shown very strongly in some place like Metro Manila.
Yes, I think it's a question in the States. If you have a question of race, here in the Philippines, it's a question of class. And you cannot, we all now realize, of course, some more than others, that we can't enclave ourselves from everyone else, that there's no such thing as the formal enclaves and the informal settlements being apart. We're all in this together, and we can't exist without each other. And that translates to how we shape our cities, and hopefully we move to shape our cities more equitably, and with everyone participating in the process. I just recall what Jane Jacobs said, that cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think not to say that only master plan communities should have this, but having mixed use communities, having basic essentials be available to everybody, accessible in terms of just being by walking or through biking. Because when Manila locked down, you would find that only people with private cars were the ones who would be able to travel. You would hear about workers traveling, walking along EDSA just because there was no public transport. And I think as much as mobility is being repaired in such a way that we're having more public transport options available to us, you can definitely see it when entire public transport, when the LRT and the buses aren't there, and the only vehicles you'd see on the roads were private vehicles. It's another way to look at it, not just in terms of how private vehicles are being used. And definitely, I think Julia was working with you or DOTR for such a long time, so we're looking forward to seeing all of their projects, from the subways to increasing the bike paths, to all of these things that are being affected to actually come to fruition.
That's a very good point, Buds. And I'd like to ask all of you, all five of you here, Vince, especially, as you know about Clark and the new townships that BCDA and the government is putting together, and you buds coming from the private sector. Where are the new cities and the new townships as we try to get Metro Manila dispersed? Where are they?
They're in your heart.
Motherhood statement, Paulo. But
No, the French
tell me.
the French couple who just won the Pritzker Prize won not because they built new buildings, but they were able to find new uses for old buildings. And
Beautiful.
my personal opinion is that we don't need new cities. We just need to build our old ones better and make them over so they're more friendly to people and to daily lives. There's so much energy we have to expend. I think we can afford a new new Clark City only once in our life, and the rest of the country really has to be built on the bones of our historic cities, because that's where people are already. We will just spend too much energy trying to create new ones. The future for urban life, aside from the metro areas, which has its own a set of problems, is in their secondary cities like Bacolod, Iloilo, Tacloban, Tagbilaran, because they are much smaller in population and size and have better opportunities for growth. I think this is where urban expansion can happen, and can happen sustainably and more equitably than creating greenfields from open spaces, because we can only afford the environmental cost for that only once in our lifetime. But that's my opinion.
I agree with you.
Good point. Yeah.
But in addition to that, I think there will be growth following a lot of these new transportation lines as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that will happen as well.
Yeah, Julia's absolutely right. No, just to answer your question, Kathy, it's where are they? The cities are going to sprout. Well, the developments are going to sprout where the infrastructure is going to be.
Yes.
As Julia correctly pointed out. And right now, the major infrastructure developments are happening north of Metro Manila. That's why if you look at all the developers, they're all there. Ayala, Robinsons, Megaworld, Vista, SM, everybody. They're all gravitating towards the area surrounding the Clark Airport, area around the major stops of the Manila to Clark Railway being built. So, and it's natural. I mean, I forgot who said this, but when they were building the interstate highway system in the US, that's what they said. You build a road, then development follows. It just works that way. So a lot of it is going to be in the north, which is good, because I think the north has been largely underdeveloped the past couple of years, which has resulted in a lot of congestion in the south of Metro Manila, in Cavite, Laguna, Batangas. So it's good that it moves. It will now move northward.
Yes,
But just to answer Cliff, as a closing, because I've got to go in like 2 minutes. Cliff, your question is very important, and I just want to say that not unlike many countries, many developing countries, the Philippines, unfortunately, is a country known for a lot of exclusivity. Mahilig ang Pilipino sa exclusive. Diba? Exclusive subdivision, exclusive yan, exclusive ganyan, exclusive that, exclusive. Diba? Yun ang problema. And I guess it's just really part of the natural evolution of a country. We're quite a young country, and we have a very rich colonial heritage, where I think this concept of exclusivity comes from the times way back ng mga Kastila, nandyan na yan,
More like baggage.
Pero I think as the country modernizes, and as the country gets more and more educated, especially these young guys here, these four very vibrant young ladies and gentlemen here, no? Their generation has to break that. No? Kasi yung mga matatanda tulad namin, nasanay na kami dun eh. Tumira sa exclusive ganito, nagpunta sa you live in an exclusive subdivision, you study in an exclusive school, 'di ba? You go to an exclusive company to work, 'di ba? Lahat exclusive eh. No, so but in the modern times, as has been shown by many developed countries like the likes of Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, I mean the concept of inclusivity becomes very important, diba? And it's going to be the main responsibility of these younger guys to make sure that we break away from that exclusivity paradigm and move to a more inclusive way of life. So with that, thank you everyone. Sorry, I've gotta rush, but please stay safe.
Great.
Don't worry.
Just take a quick group photo.
Vince,
So,
let's take a group photo
Take
before
care.
you leave.
could we take a...
Let's take a group
Go,
photo.
go, go.
Okay, 1,
Let's take a
2,
group photo.
3. Thank
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you, thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you,
Vince.
Vince.
you so much.
Salamat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a very interesting end note from Vince. But we still have a couple of minutes. Would still like to hear from you, especially on policy making for our cities. So,
Well, if I may, Kathy, one issue
Yes.
we failed to pick up was the cultural identity of a place, and that ties to what I said earlier. If we are going to set up new townships, it's better to build on the historic bones or heritage legacies of these places and expand from that. One of the challenges of all of these new towns is to really try find something to latch onto, and it's been almost impossible to do that in a greenfield site, because if you build something from scratch, tabula rasa, that's unless you really dig very deep, it's almost impossible to produce that sense of place. And if you don't have a sense of place or heritage, you don't have a sense of community. And Dr. Shalsita over at the Ateneo has just interrogated that in a whole book, saying that we have forgotten that our towns and cities have long histories, and the embedded memories in them is enough fuel on which to build our new urbanism or our future urbanism. And I think that's something we have to tackle as designers, that we have to go back and get in touch with our roots and use that as a basis for our future designs.
Paolo, one of the things I see in the US that I don't see here are business improvement districts, where the local community is heavily involved in anything that the city wants to do in terms of economic reform. If they want to tear down a space, you need to get the local community involved. If it's a historical building, then you need to basically preserve some of the walls or something like that. But here we don't see that because the community isn't as involved.
Well, the development of civil society in the Philippines is fraught with a lot of problems because of the nature of how we were all brought up, especially in the business community. Is more family centered. It's more parochial rather than place based or the connections that we can build based on where we are. It's more than who you went to school with. And so civil society and the building of civic mindedness, we've lost that. Before the Second World War, we were taught civics and to find connections to our place, not just to our families. And we lost that as we rebuilt after the war. And because of urban sprawl and the segregation because of the building of enclaves, we have not been able to do that. If you look at the definition of the city in the Philippine context, we have a disjoint between what government defines as a city and what developers, such as yours, not you, but you see, you have Bonifacio Global City, they call themselves a city, but they're in Taguig and Makati City. Eastwood City is in Pasig City, but they call themselves a city. So the definitions of the cities are now shaped by, I'm sorry to say, the more neoliberal forces rather than than the sources that come from civic mindedness or a sense of being a community or a people. And that's a big discussion we have to have there.
And I think, sorry, just to loop it back into the public space, is that, the most democratic space in the city is the public space. And that's the best example to show that everyone belongs and everyone has a right to the city, is equally distributing those amenities and not just having them in between a condo building where people can afford it or in a private subdivision where you can afford to allocate that space and fund it. But it's really to have it equally distributed, having everyone feel that they have that access to it. And, even other places have this challenge, like in New York City, where you'll have a waterfront, but you can only get there if you pass through a certain area that you might not feel comfortable going into, depending on if you're from that area or different classes or race, et cetera. So I think, making sure that everyone also feels that they have the access to that space is really crucial. And I think something that would be interesting, in the private development sense, Buds, as you're moving forward, something that would be interesting to think about in the community engagement side is like, how will people be able to inform? So say that I, am going to be born and raised in the city that you're building. What happens later when I want to say, can I close this street? Can we put different trees here? Do I have to go to a real estate management office? I don't have a barangay hall. I don't have like a local representative who I'm electing. You're building a city that is done by a developer. This was something that I struggled with, having lived in some place like Malate and Paco, and then going to and Poblacion, and then going to Rockwell. Like, who do I talk to? Who am I represented by? I think that's something that would be interesting to see moving forward, if you can create not just like community activities, but also a conversation between the people who end up being from there, in the future.
Yeah, you're actually, there is an estate association, but if you're a resident there and want something from the estate, I doubt if they'll go to the estate association.
Well, especially if you're a renter, if you don't own, right? Like, but
but you're absolutely right. Yeah. And, these kinds of innovations, complaints, obviously, is one of the things that we will need to tackle. And hopefully, when you come back, Julia, hopefully you can help us.
Wrap up. And thank you for joining.
We'll wrap up.
Yeah.
We'd like to invite
last
everyone
thoughts.
to have their last words.
Yeah, last words.
This is a really good discussion.
Paulo, start.
Now it's my turn. Okay,
now it's your
the last
turn.
word.
For
No,
conference.
it's hard to start with Paulo.
No, I can go ahead, no problem.
Yeah.
I have a statement to make. I miss traffic. You know why? I miss traffic because before the pandemic, I would only have 2 meetings in a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Today with Zoom, everybody wants to meet you, and I take in 5 or 6 Zoom meetings a day. It's ridiculous. I have no time to rest. And it's just so tiring, and that's where a lot of the fatigue comes from. But seriously, my definition of a great city is one where the Wi-Fi works. So hopefully, Elon Musk, and I'm going to get that service. Once Elon Musk puts all of his satellites up in space, then that's one solution. But seriously speaking, all of these discussions and the issues taken up are all very exciting to bring up, and hopefully this discourse will continue with Anthology year to year, and hopefully we'll see everyone again in much better circumstances next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo.
Thanks, Paulo. Buds?
No, I think Paulo said everything already. We discussed a lot. I think one of the major key learnings for us, and we're actually already doing it, is obviously our investments in the public space. We are traditional developers. We build condos, we build offices, but at the same time, I'm heavily invested in building everything that's just for the residents and for pedestrians, sidewalks, arcades, parks, or even building churches. So we're eager to make sure that our developments are pandemic resilient, and hopefully these kinds of dialogues and learning from everyone. I work with Kathy, with Paolo, and obviously with Julia's been giving me a lot of advice. So the reason why I found NACTA was because of Julia. So all of these things that we're doing right now and on our streets in terms of our bike paths and everything, it was because I met Julia 3 years ago. So yeah, we're I think everybody should learn from each other. I know crab mentality is a common trait of that we have, but hopefully developers get a chance and to work with everybody and learn from each other.
So before Cliff Pearson wraps everything up, we'd like to hear from Julia and Rhea.
Well, I'd like to take off from what the earlier discussion about a sense of place. No? I think that's very important. I think we really need to emphasize that everyone must rediscover this sense of place or this sense of placemaking. I enjoyed hearing the stories of like from older generations of what the place meant to them, and I think we really need to help nurture that in the future generations. So just that sense of that ownership of where they're from or where they are, and having cities embrace this. And I guess there is this quote that is from the president of the International Council of Design, and Robert L. Peters, when he talked about design, and he said design creates culture, culture creates culture shapes values, and values determine the future. And I think that's very relevant as we define or like as we rediscover cities and our role in creating these cities.
Yeah, thank you, everyone here for such a great discussion. I'm happy to see you all. I miss you all a lot. And I think as my final point, something I didn't get to talk about that I would like to kind of plug, our first project of Agile City Partners has been launching this global partnership for informal transportation. And it's something that hasn't been talked about very much in the transportation conversation. And yet it's ubiquitous. It is everywhere in a lot of the cities of the global South. If we talk about reusing something that's already on the ground, if we talk about giving people equal access and opportunity to livelihood and connection to jobs, these are things that informal transportation is going to play a big role in the future. If we talk about decarbonizing the transportation sector, we can't do that with autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles only. We're going to have to do it with what's already on the ground, this mass transportation system. It's tricycles, it's jeepneys, it's minibuses in other cities. It's all of this kind of transportation that has grown from the bottom up, has been, this entrepreneurial approach where people are coming together and saying, okay, we have this big gap, we have this big need, what are we going to do to fill it? And I think that the cities of the future, as much as we're going to evolve in discussing what a smart city should be, I think part of that will be, using what's already on the ground, investing in people and new ideas and bridging innovation that is something that's homegrown with something that is working on international platforms and technology. Informal transportation will have a role to play there. And I think a lot of the principles, what we're talking about, sustainability, equity will come together in that space. So I'm excited to see where that goes as well.
I was very impressed by Julia's little coworker there. How well behaved.
And so adorable.
Yeah, very well behaved.
She's just 3 months old, and now I'm walking on the street with 2 strollers, and you think about 1.5 meters of sidewalk space is the minimum requirement in the Philippines. You can't do it with 2 kids and strollers. I mean, people do it all the time. People do it, and they make the best of it, right? But it's a big lesson. I think when you're thinking of how to plan a city, go out with a stroller, and if you can do it with a stroller, you can do it with kids. You can do it as a mother. I think it will work for a lot of people.
First of all, I thought the panel was great. What I liked about it was that in some ways there was a full range of scales that were addressed. So Buds and Vince were dealing with larger developments, entire cities. And Paulo was talking about, well, what do we do with the places that are already there? And I think those are the 2 great challenges. Creating new cities is one opportunity, and especially for a place like Manila that's so big and has so many people. And Subic and Clark were there to begin with. They just weren't being used for anything that actually helped the people in the Philippines too much. So actually using them was a great idea. But the other challenge is, what do we do with the neighborhoods that are on the ground right now? And I think, the question there is, how do you create catalysts for small scale development? What is the role of the residents who are already there? What's the role of government? What's the role of the private sector? But I agree that, the most interesting places are almost always the places that have long histories. New cities are usually difficult places to live in for at least 100 years. I remember reading about, Washington, D.C. When Washington, D.C. was 100 years old, it was still considered an awful, horrible place. But 100 years after that, all of a sudden, it's now an interesting place with small scale neighborhoods and fabric that actually work, on a lot of different levels. So, time is something that creates those connections and create, the interest. But how do we create those sparks in the places that are already there, especially if we don't want to wait 100 years? So I think those are the two great challenges, the big scale, the greenfield, and then the existing neighborhoods, and how do we make sure that they work well for the 21st century?
Excellent point. And I think in that discussion, truly the civil society and our government leaders, our LGUs have a big role to play. And there is hope, in ULI, Buds and I were in the Urban Land Institute. Buds and I were part of a mentoring discussion group with young leaders, mostly very young mayors. So there is hope. So let's look at that and let's end with that. Let's end with hope. And our city is so important. Our cities are vital.
Thank you.
We turn over the floor to